On November 27, 1884, Lieutenant Governor Dewdney proclaimed the incorporation of the town of Calgary. Shortly after, on December 3rd, Calgarians went to the polls to elect their first mayor and for councillors. The Northwest Municipal Ordinance of 1880 provided voting rights to any male British subject over 21 years of age who owned at minimum $300 of property. Each elector was able to cast one vote for the mayor and up to 4 votes for the councillors, plurality block voting. George Murdoch won the mayoral race in a landslide victory with 200 votes over E. Redpath 16, while Simon Jackson Hogg, Neville James Lindsay, Joseph Henry Millward, and Simon John Clark were elected councillors. The next morning, the council met for the first time at Bowdoin and Clark's Saloon. Law and order remained top of mind in the frontier town. In early 1880, Jack Campbell was appointed as a constable for the community. And in early 1885, the town council passed by Law 11, creating the position of chief constable and assigning relevant duties, a precursor to the Calgary Police. Service. The first chief constable, John Jack S. Ingram, who had previously served as the first police chief in Winnipeg, was empowered to arrest drunken and disorderly people, stop all fast riding in town, attend all fires and council meetings. Calgary Town Council was eager to employ constables versus contracting the NWMP for town duty, as the police force was seen as a money-making proposition. Constables received half of the fines from liquor cases, meaning Chief Constable Ingram could easily pay his $60 per month salary and the expense of a town jail. Turmoil in 1885 and 1886 and the Sandstone City for the town of Calgary. 1880 turned out to be a success. However, dark years lay ahead for the fledgling community. The community quickly raised $500, and Murdoch and a group of residents headed east. 60. The punishment of Clark did not escape Hugh Cayley, the editor of the Calgary Herald and clerk of the District C. Cayley published articles critical of Travis and his judgment, in which Travis responded by calling Cayley to court, dismissing him from his position as clerk, ordering Cayley to apologize and pay a $100 fine. Cayley refused to pay the fine, which Travis increased to $500, and on January 5th, the day after the January 1886 Calgary town election, Cayley was imprisoned by Travis. Murdoch returned to Calgary on December 27, 1885, only a week before the election, to find the town in disarray. 61. Shortly before the 1886 election, G.E. Marsh brought a charge of corruption against Murdoch and council over irregularities in the voters' list. Travis found Murdoch and the councillors guilty, disqualifying them from running in the 1886 election, barring them from municipal office for 2 years, and fining Murdoch $100 and the councillors $20. This was despite the fact Murdoch was visiting Eastern Canada while the alleged tampering was occurring. 62. Travis' disqualification did not dissuade Calgary voters, and Murdoch defeated his opponent James Riley by a significant margin in early January to be re-elected as mayor. Travis accepted a petition from Riley to unseat Murdoch and 2 of the elected councillors and declare Riley the mayor of Calgary. Both Murdoch and Riley claimed to be the lawful mayor of the growingly disorganized town of Calgary, both holding council meetings and attempting to govern. 64. Word of the issues in Calgary reached the Minister of Justice John Sparrow David Thompson in Ottawa, who ordered Justice Thomas Wardlaw Taylor of Winnipeg to conduct an inquiry into the case of Jeremiah Travis. The federal government acted before receiving Taylor's report. Jeremiah Travis was suspended, and the government waited for his official tenure to expire, after which he was pensioned off. Justice Taylor's report, which was released in June 1887, found Travis had exceeded his authority and erred in his judgments. The Territorial Council called for a new municipal election to be held in Calgary on November 3, 1886. George Clift King defeated his opponent John Lineham for the office of mayor of Calgary. Downtown, after the Calgary Fire of 1886, Calgary had only a couple days' peace following the November election before the Calgary Fire of 1886 destroyed much of the community's downtown. Part of the slow response to the fire can be attributed to the absence of functioning local government during 1886, as neither George Murdoch or James Riley was capable of effectively governing the town. The newly ordered chemical engine for the recently organized Calgary Fire Department, Calgary Hook, ladder, and bucket corps was held in the CPR storage yard due to lack of payment. Members of the Calgary Fire Department broke into the CPR storage yard on the day of the fire to retrieve the engine. In total, 14 buildings were destroyed, with losses estimated at $103,200, although no one was killed or injured. The new town council sprung into action, drafting a bylaw requiring all large downtown buildings to be built with sandstone, which was readily available nearby in the form of Pascapoo sandstone. Following the fire, several quarries were opened around the city by prominent local businessmen, including Thomas Edworthy, Wesley Fletcher, or J.G. McCallum, and William Oliver. Prominent buildings built with sandstone following the fire include Knox Presbyterian Church 1887, Imperial Bank Building 1887, Calgary City Hall 1911, and Calgary Courthouse Note to 1914. In February 1887, Donald Watson Davis, who was running the I.G. Baker store in Calgary, was elected MP for Alberta Provisional District. A former whiskey trader in southern Alberta, he had turned his hand to building Fort Macleod and Fort Calgary. The main other contender for the job, Frank Oliver, was a prominent Edmontonian, so Davis's success was a sign that Calgary was surpassing Edmonton. Previously the main center on the western prairies, 1887 to 1900, Calgary continued to expand when real estate speculation took hold of Calgary in 1889. Speculators began buying and building west of Center Street, and Calgary quickly began to sprawl west to the ire of property owners on the east side of town. Property owners on both sides of Center Street sought to bring development to their side of Calgary. Lost successfully clarification needed by East Sider James Walker, who convinced the town council to purchase land on the east side to build a stockyard, guaranteeing meat packing and processing plants would be constructed on the east side. By 1890, Calgary had reached present-day 17th Avenue, east to the Elbow River and west to 8th Street, and the first federal census listed the boomtown at 3,876 inhabitants. The economic conditions in Calgary began to deteriorate in 1892 as development in the downtown slowed. The streetcar system started in 1889 was put on hold 80, and smaller property owners began to sell. The first step in connecting the District of Alberta happened in Calgary on July 21, 1890, as Minister of the Interior Edgar Dewdney turned the first sod for the Calgary and Edmonton Railway in front of F2000 residents. The railway was completed in August 1891. Although its end of steel was on the south side of the river opposite Edmonton, it immensely shortened travel time between the two communities. Previously, stagecoach passengers and mail could arrive in 5 days, and animal-pulled freight anywhere between 2 and 3 weeks. The train was able to make the trip in only a few hours. Smallpox arrived in Calgary in June 1892, when a Chinese resident was found with the disease. And by August 9, people had contracted the disease with 3 deaths. Calgarians placed the blame for the disease on the local Chinese population, resulting in a riot on August 2, 1892. Residents descended on the town's Chinese-owned laundries, smashing windows and attempting to burn the structures to the ground. The local police did not attempt to intervene. Mayor Alexander Lucas had inexplicably left town during the riot, and when he returned home, he called the NWMP in to patrol Calgary for 3 weeks to prevent further riots. The turn of the century brought questions of provincehood the top of mind in Calgary. On September 1, 1905, Alberta was proclaimed a province with a provisional capital in Edmonton. It would be left up to the legislature to choose the permanent location. One of the first decisions of the new Alberta legislature was the capital. And although William Henry Cushing advocated strongly for Calgary, the resulting vote saw Edmonton win the capital 16-8. Calgarians were disappointed on the city not being named the capital and focused their attention on the formation of the provincial university. However, the efforts by the community could not sway the government, and the University of Alberta was founded in the city of Strathcona, Premier Rutherford's home, which was subsequently amalgamated into the city of Edmonton in 1912. Calgary was not to be left without higher education facilities as the Provincial Normal School opened in the McDougall School building in 1905. In 1910, R.B. Bennett introduced a bill in the Alberta legislature to incorporate the Calgary University. However, there was significant opposition to degree-granting institutions in such a small province. A commission was appointed to evaluate the Calgary proposal, which found the second university to be unnecessary. However, the commission did recommend the formation of the Provincial Institute of Technology and Art in Calgary State, which was formed later in 1915. Postcard of 1st Street West, Calgary. Postmarked May 8, 1913, built-up areas of Calgary between 1905 and 1912 were serviced by power and water. The city continued a program of paving and sidewalk laying, and with the CPR constructed a series of subways under the tracks to connect the town with streetcars. The first 3 motor buses hit Calgary streets in 1907, and 2 years later, the municipally owned street railway system, fit with 7 miles of track, opened in Calgary. The immediately popular street railway system reached 250,000 passengers per month by 1910. The privately owned MacArthur Bridge, precursor to the Centre Street Bridge over the Bow River, opened in 1907, which provided for residential expansion north of the Bow River. 101. The early 1910s saw real estate speculation hit Calgary once again, with property prices rising significantly with growing municipal investment. CPR's decision to construct a car shop at Ogden set to employ over 5,000 people. The projected arrival of the Grand Trunk Pacific and Canadian Northern Railways in the city, and Calgary's growing reputation as a growing economic hub. 100 to the period between 1906 and 1911 was the largest population growth period in the city's history, expanding from 11,967 to 43,700 for inhabitants. Several ambitious projects were started during this period, including a new city hall, the Hudson's Bay Department Store, the Grain Exchange Building, and the Palliser Hotel. This period also corresponded to the end of the Sandstone City era, as steel frames and terracotta facades such as the Burns Building 1913, which were prevalent in other North American cities, overtook the unique sandstone character of Calgary. The growing city and enthusiastic residents were rewarded in 1908 with the federally funded Dominion exhibition. Seeking to take advantage of the opportunity to promote itself, the city spent 145,000 Canadian dollars to build 6 new pavilions and a racetrack. 106, it held a lavish parade as well as rodeo, horse racing, and trick roping competitions as part of the event. The exhibition was a success, drawing 100,000 people to the fairgrounds over 7 days despite an economic recession that afflicted the city of 25,000. Calgary had previously held a number of agricultural exhibitions dating back to 1886, and recognizing the city's enthusiasm, Guy Wiedeck, an American trick roper who participated in the Dominion exhibition as part of the Miller Brothers' 101 Ranch Reel Wild West show, returned to Calgary in 1912 to host the first Calgary Stampede in the hopes of establishing an event that more accurately represented the Wild West than the shows he was a part of. 108. He initially failed to sell civic leaders and the Calgary Industrial Exhibition on his plans. 109, but with the assistance of local livestock agent H.C. McCullen, Wiedeck convinced businessmen Pat Burns, George Lane, A.J. McLean, and A.E. Cross to put up $100,000 to guarantee funding for the event. Program for the 1912 Calgary Stampede, featuring the Big Four, Burns, Lane, Cross, and McLean Big Four, as they came to be known, viewed the project as a final celebration of their life as cattlemen. The city constructed a rodeo arena on the fairgrounds, and over 100,000 people attended the 6-day event in September 1912 to watch hundreds of cowboys from Western Canada, the United States, and Mexico compete for $20,000 in prizes. The event generated $120,000 in revenue and was hailed as a success. The Calgary Stampede has continued as a civic tradition for over 100 years, marketing itself as the greatest outdoor show on earth, with Calgarians sporting Western wear for 10 days while attending the annual parade, daily pancake breakfasts, while agriculture and railway activities were the dominant aspects of Calgary's early economy. The Turner Valley Discovery Well blew southwest of Calgary on May 14, 1914, marked the beginning of the oil and gas age in Calgary. Archibald Wayne Dingman and Calgary Petroleum Products discovery was heralded as the biggest oil field in the British Empire at around 19 million cubic meters. And in a 3-week period, an estimated 500 oil companies sprang into existence. Calgarians were enthusiastic to invest in new oil companies, with many losing life savings during the short 1914 boom in hastily formed companies. Outbreak of the First World War further dampened the oil craze as more men and resources left for Europe, and agricultural prices for wheat and cattle increased. Turner Valley's oil fields would boom again in 1924 and 1936, and by the Second World War, the Turner Valley oil field was producing more than 95% of the oil in Canada. However, the city would wait until 1947 for Let It Know, one to definitively shift Calgary to an oil and gas city. While Edmonton would see significant population and economic growth with the Leduc discovery, many corporate offices established in Calgary after Turner Valley refused to relocate north. Consequently, by 1967, Calgary had more millionaires than any other city in Canada, and per capita, more cars than any city in the world. Early 20th century Calgary served as a hotbed for political activity. Historically, Calgarians supported the provincial and federal conservative parties, the opposite of the liberal-friendly city of Edmonton. However, Calgarians were sympathetic to the cause of workers and supported the development of labor organizations. In 1909, the United Farmers of Alberta UFA formed in Edmonton through the merger of two earlier farm organizations as a nonpartisan lobbying organization to represent the interests of farmers. The UFA eventually dropped its nonpartisan stance when it contested the 1921 provincial election. It was elected to form the province's first non-liberal government. By that time, Calgary was using single transferable vote STV, a form of proportional representation, to elect its city councillors. Calgary was the first city in Canada to adopt PR for its city elections. Councillors were elected in one at-large district. Each voter cast just a single vote using a ranked transferable ballot. The UFA government elected in 1921 changed the provincial election law so that Calgary could elect its MLA letters through PR as well. Calgary elected its MLA letters through PR until 1956 and its councillors through PR until 1971, although mostly using instant runoff voting, not STV. In the 1960s, Calgary endured a 6-year recession following the First World War. The high unemployment rate from reduced manufacturing demand, compounded with servicemen returning from Europe needing work, created economic and social unrest. By 1921, over 2,000 men, representing 11% of the male workforce, were officially unemployed. Labor organizations began endorsing candidates for Calgary City Council in the late 1910s and were quickly successful in electing sympathetic candidates to office, including Mayor Samuel Hunter Adams in 1920. As well, the Industrial Workers of the World and its sequel, the One Big Union, found much support among Calgary workers. The city's support of labor and agricultural groups made it a natural location for the founding meeting of the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, precursor to the New Democratic Party. The organizational meeting was held in Calgary on July 31, 1932, with attendance exceeding 1,300 people. Pat Lenihan was elected to the Calgary City Council in 1939, in part due to the use of proportional representation in city elections. He is the only Communist Party member elected to Calgary Council. He is the subject of the book Patrick Lenihan, From Irish Rebel to Founder of Canadian Public Sector Unionism, edited by Gilbert Levine, a Fabaska University Press. In 1922, Civic Government Association formed in opposition to the power of labor groups, endorsing its own competing slate of candidates. LABOUR's influence was short-lived on the City Council, with Labor as a whole failing to receive substantial support after 1924. The 1970s energy crisis resulted in significant investment and growth in Calgary. By 1981, 45% of the Calgary labor force was made up of management, administrative, or clerical staff, above the national average of 35%. 128. Calgary's population grew with the opportunity the oil boom brought. The 20-year period from 1966 to 1986 saw the population increase from 330,575 to 636. That population growth became a source of pride. The June 1980 Calgary magazine exclaimed, "Welcome to Calgary." Calgary almost specializes in newcomers. High-rise buildings were erected during the economic boom, and more office space opened in Calgary in 1979 than in New York City and Chicago combined. 132. 133. The end of the oil boom is associated with the National Energy Program implemented by Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau's government and the drop in world oil prices. And the end of the construction boom in Calgary is associated with the completion of the Petro-Canada Centre in 1984. The two-tower granite Petro-Canada Centre, which some locals called Red Square, alluding to the city's hostile view of the state-owned petroleum company, saw the larger 53-story West Tower rise to 215 meters, 705 feet, and become the largest building in Calgary for 26 years, and a smaller 32-story East Tower rise 130 meters for 130 feet. 132. The city further expanded the train system. Planning began in 1981, and the northeast leg of the system was to be operational in time for the 1988 Olympics. The 1980s oil glut caused by falling demand and the National Energy Program marked the end of Calgary's boom. In 1983, Calgary City Council announced service cuts to ease the $16 million deficit. 121 city employees were laid off. Unemployment increased from 5 to 11% between November 1981 and November 1982, eventually peaking at 14.9% in March 1983. The decline was so swift that the city's population decreased for the first time in history from April 1982 to April 1983, and 3,331 homes were foreclosed by financial institutions in 1983. Low oil prices in the 1980s prevented a full economic recovery until the 1990s. In May 1980, Nelson Scalabania announced that the Atlanta Flames Hockey Club would relocate and become the Calgary Flames. Scalabania represented a group of Calgary businessmen that included oil magnates Harley Hotchkiss, Ralph T. Scurfield, Norman Green, Darrell Seaman, and Byron Seaman, and former Calgary Stampeders player Norman Quam. Atlanta team owner Tom Cousins sold the team to Scalabania for $16 million United States dollars, a record sale price for an NHL team at the time. The team reached the playoffs each year in its first 10 years in Calgary and won the team's only Stanley Cup in 1989. Olympic Legacy main article. 1988 Winter Olympics. Public concern existed regarding the potential long-term debt implications that had plagued Montreal following the 1976 Olympics. 140. The Calgary Olympic Development Association led the bid for Calgary and spent 2 years building local support for the project, selling memberships to 80,000 of the city's 600,000 residents. It secured 270 million Canadian dollars in funding from the federal and provincial governments, while civic leaders, including Mayor Ralph Klein, crisscrossed the world, attempting to woo International Olympic Committee (IOC) delegates. Calgary was one of 3 finalists, opposed by the Swedish community of Fallon and Italian community of Cortina d'Ampezzo. 142. On September 30th, 1981, the International Olympic Committee voted to give Calgary the right to host the 1988 Olympic Winter Games, becoming the first Canadian host for the Winter Games. The Games' 5 primary venues were all purpose-built, however, at significant cost. The Olympic Saddledome was the primary venue for ice hockey and figure skating. Located at Stampede Park, the facility was expected to cost $83 million, but cost overruns pushed the facility to nearly $100 million. The Olympic Oval was built on the campus of the University of Calgary. It was the first fully enclosed 400-meter speed skating venue in the world, as it was necessary to protect against the possibility of either bitter cold temperatures or ice-melting Chinook winds. 146 7 world and 3 Olympic records were broken during the Games, resulting in the facility earning praise as the fastest ice on Earth. 145 Canada Olympic Park was built on the western outskirts of Calgary and hosted bobsled, luge, ski jumping, and freestyle skiing. It was the most expensive facility built for the Games, costing $200 million. Despite Canada failing to earn a gold medal in the Games, the events proved to be a major economic boom for the city, which had fallen into its worst recession in 40 years following the collapse of both oil and grain prices in the mid-1980s. 147, 148. A report prepared for the city in January 1985 estimated the Games would create 11,100 man-years of employment and generate 450 Canadian dollars million in salaries and wages. 149. In its post-Games report, OCO 88 estimated the Olympics created 1.4 billion Canadian dollars in economic benefits across Canada during the 1980s, 70% within Alberta, as a result of capital spending, increased tourism, and new sporting opportunities created by the facilities. 1990s to present, thanks in part to escalating oil prices. The economy in Calgary and Alberta was booming until the end of 2009, and the region of nearly 1.1 million people was home to the fastest-growing economy in the country. While the oil and gas industry comprise an important part of the economy, the city has invested a great deal into other areas, such as tourism and high-tech manufacturing. Over 3.1 million people now visit the city annually, 152 for its many festivals and attractions, especially the Calgary Stampede. The nearby mountain resort towns of Banff, Lake Louise, and Canmore are also becoming increasingly popular with tourists. Other modern industries include light manufacturing, high-tech, film, e-commerce, transportation, and services. Widespread flooding throughout southern Alberta, including on the Bow and Elbow rivers, forced the evacuation of over 75,000 city residents on June 21, 2013, and left large areas of the city, including downtown, without power. Geographic satellite view of Calgary is at the transition zone between the Canadian Rockies foothills and the Canadian prairies. The city lies within the foothills of the Parkland Natural Region and the Grasslands Natural Region. 155. Downtown Calgary is about 1,042 point for meters 3,420 feet above sea level. 6. And the airport is 1,076 meters 3,005. In 2011, the city covered a land area of 825.29 square kilometers, 318.65 square miles. 157. Calgary is in southern Alberta and also next to the Rocky Mountains. Two rivers and two creeks run through the city. The Bow River is the larger, and it flows from the west to the south. The Elbow River flows northwards from the south until it converges with the Bow River at the historic site of Fort Calgary near downtown. Nose Creek flows into Calgary from the northwest. then south to join the Bow River, several kilometers east of the Elbow-Bow confluence. Fish Creek flows into Calgary from the southwest and converges with the Bow River near Mackenzie Lake. The city of Calgary, 848 square kilometers, 327 square miles in size, 158, consists of an inner city surrounded by suburban communities of various density. The city is immediately surrounded by two municipal districts, Foothills County to the south and Rocky View County to the north, west, and east. Proximate urban communities beyond the city within the Calgary metropolitan region include the city of Airdrie to the north, the city of Chestermere, the town of Strathmore, and the hamlet of Langdon to the east, the towns of Okotoks and High River to the south, and the town of Cochrane to the northwest. Numerous rural subdivisions are located within the Elbow Valley, Springbank, and Burspaw areas to the west and northwest. The Tsutana Nation Indian Reserve and 0145 borders Calgary to the southwest. Over the years, the city has made many land annexations to facilitate growth. In the most recent annexation of lands from the surrounding Rocky View County, completed in July 2007, the city annexed Shepherd, a former hamlet, and placed its boundaries adjacent to the hamlet of Balzac and city of Chestermere, and very close to the city of Airdrie. In the 2021 Census of Population, conducted by Statistics Canada, the city of Calgary had a population of 1,306,784, living in 500 to 1,300, one of its 531,060 to total private dwellings, a change of 5.5% from its 2016 population of 1,239,220. With a land area of 820.6 to square kilometers, 316.8 for square miles, it had a population density of 1,590 to point per square kilometers for 1,120 for point. At the Census Metropolitan Area CMA level in the 2021 census, the Calgary CMA had a population of 1,481,806, living in 563,440 of its 594,513 total private dwellings, a change of 6% from its 2016 population of 1,003,000, with a land area of 5,098.68 square kilometers, 1,968.61 square miles. It had a population density of 290.6 per square kilometers, 750.7 square mi in 2021. The population of the city of Calgary, according to its 2019 municipal census, is 1,285,711, a change of 1% from its 2018 municipal census population of 1,267,344. In the 2016 Census of Population, conducted by Statistics Canada, the city of Calgary had a population of 1,239,220, living in 466,725 of its 489,650 total private dwellings, a change of 13% from its 2011 population of 1,096,833. With a land area of 825.56 square kilometers, 318.75 square miles, it had a population density of 1,501.1 per square kilometers, 3,887.7 square mi in 2016. 185, Calgary was ranked first among the 3 cities in Canada that saw their population grow by more than 100,000 people between 2011 and during this time, Calgary saw a population growth of 142,387 people, followed by Edmonton at 120,345 people, and Toronto at 116,511 people. The Calgary Census Metropolitan Area CMA is the 4th largest CMA in Canada and the largest in Alberta. It had a population of 1,392,609 in the 2016 census compared to its 2011 population of 1,214,839. Its 5-year population change of 14.6% was the highest among all CMA letters in Canada between 2011 and 2016. With a land area of 5,107.55 square kilometers, 1,970.0 square miles, the Calgary CMA had a population density of 270.7 per square kilometers, 706.2 square mi. Statistics Canada's latest estimate of the Calgary CMA population as of July 1, 2017, is 1,488,841. In 2015, the population within an hour commuting distance of the city was 1,511,755. As a consequence of the large number of corporations, as well as the presence of the energy sector in Alberta, Calgary has a median family income of $100,530. 190. The 2021 census reported that immigrants, individuals born outside Canada, comprise 430,640 persons, or 33.3% of the total population of Calgary. Of the total immigrant population, the top countries of origin were Philippines, 65,430 persons, or 15.2%, India, 56,515 persons, or 13.1%, China, 36,240 persons, or 8.4%. United Kingdom, 20,415 persons, or 4.7%. Pakistan, 18,375 persons, or 4.3%. Vietnam, 15,395 persons, or 3.6%. Nigeria, 12,450 persons, or 2.9%. United States of America, 10,890 persons, or 2.5%. Hong Kong, 10,775 persons, or 2.5%. And South Korea, 8,210 persons, or 1.9%. Calgary is recognized as a leader in the Canadian oil and gas industry, and its economy expanded at a significantly higher rate than the overall Canadian economy, 43% and 25%, respectively, over the 10-year period from 1999 to 2009. Its high personal and family incomes, low unemployment, and high GDP per capita have all benefited from increased sales and prices due to a resource boom. 196. And increasing economic diversification. Calgary benefits from a relatively strong job market in Alberta and is part of the Calgary-Edmonton corridor, one of the fastest-growing regions in the country. It is the head office for many major oil and gas-related companies, and many financial service businesses have grown up around them. Small business and self-employment levels also rank amongst the highest in Canada. 197. Calgary is a distribution and transportation hub with high retail sales. Calgary's economy is decreasingly dominated by the oil and gas industry, although it is still the single largest contributor to the city's GDP. In 2006, Calgary's real GDP in constant $1,997 was $52.386 billion Canadian dollars, of which oil, gas and mining contributed 12%. 200. The larger oil and gas companies are BP Canada, Canadian Natural Resources Limited, Cenovus Energy, Encana, Imperial Oil, Suncor Energy, Shell Canada, Husky Energy, TransCanada, and Nexen, making the city home to 87% of Canada's oil and natural gas producers and 66% of coal producers. As of November 2016, the city had a labor force of 901,700, a 74.6% participation rate, and 10.3% unemployment rate. In 2013, Calgary's four largest industries by employee count were trade, with 112,800 employees, professional, scientific, and technical services, 100,800 employees, healthcare and social assistance, 89,200 employees, and construction, 81,500 employees. In 2006, the top 3 private sector employers in Calgary were Shaw Communications, 7,500 employees, Nova Chemicals for 1,945, and TELUS for 517. 206 companies rounding out the top 10 were Mark's Work Wearhouse, the Calgary Co-op, Nexen, Canadian Pacific Railway, CNRL, Shell Canada, and Dow Chemical Canada. 206. The top public sector employers in 2006 were the Calgary Zone of the Alberta Health Services, 22,000, the City of Calgary, 12,296, and the Calgary Board of Education, 8,000. Public sector employers rounding out the top 5 were the University of Calgary and the Calgary Roman Catholic Separate School Division. In Canada, Calgary has the second highest concentration of head offices in Canada, behind Toronto, the most head offices per capita, and the highest head office revenue per capita. Some large employers with Calgary head offices include Canada Safeway Limited, Westfair Foods Ltd., Suncor Energy, Agrium, Flint Energy Services Ltd., Shaw Communications, and Canadian Pacific Kansas City, 207. CPR moved its head office from Montreal in 1996, and Imperial Oil moved from Toronto in 2005. And Canada's new 58-floor corporate headquarters, the Bow, became the tallest building in Canada outside of Toronto, 208. In 2001, the city became the corporate headquarters of the TSX Venture Exchange. WestJet is headquartered close to the Calgary International Airport, and Enerjet has its headquarters on the airport grounds. Prior to their dissolution, Canadian Airlines and Air Canada's subsidiary Zip were also headquartered near the city's airport. Although its main office is now based in Yellowknife, Canadian North, purchased from Canadian Airlines in September 1998, still maintains operations and charter offices in Calgary. One of Canada's largest accounting firms, MNP LLP, is also headquartered in Calgary. According to a report by Alexei Olszewski of Avis & Young published in August 2015, vacancy rates rose to 11.5% in the second quarter of 2015 from 8.3% in 2014. Oil and gas company office spaces in downtown Calgary are subleasing 40% of their overall vacancies. 216H and our Real Estate Investment Trust, which owns the 58-story, 158.0-square-meter Bow Tower, claims the building was fully leased. Tenants such as Suncor have been letting staff and contractors go in response to the downturn. Arts and Culture Calgary was designated as one of Canada's cultural capitals in 2012. While many Calgarians continue to live in the city's suburbs, more central neighborhoods such as Kensington, Inglewood, Forest Lawn, Bridgeland, Marda Loop, the Mission District, and especially the Beltline, have become more popular, and density in those areas has increased. Calgary is the site of the Southern Alberta Jubilee Auditorium Performing Arts, Culture and Community Facility. The auditorium is one of two twin facilities in the province. The other is the Northern Alberta Jubilee Auditorium in Edmonton, each being locally known as the Jube. The 2,538-seat auditorium was opened in 1957-119 and has been host to hundreds of musical theater, theatrical, stage, and local productions. The Calgary Jube is the resident home of the Alberta Ballet Company, the Calgary Opera, and the annual Civic Remembrance Day ceremonies. Both auditoriums operate 365 days a year and are run by the provincial government. Both received major renovations as part of the province's centennial in 2005. Transportation Google Transit Train is Calgary's light rail transit system, boasting the second highest ridership in North America. Calgary Transit provides public transportation services throughout the city with regular bus service, Bus Rapid Transit BRT, and Light Rail Transit LRT. Calgary's light rail system, known as the Train, was the second light rail system in North America behind the Edmonton LRT. It currently consists of 2 lines, Red Line and Blue Line, with 44 stations and 58.2 kilometers, 36.2 miles of track. Most of the train runs on both dedicated tracks with partial grade separation across suburban areas and a street-level section across downtown. The train is North America's second busiest LRT system, carrying 270,000 passengers per weekday, and approximately half of Calgary downtown workers take the transit to work. The train is also North America's first and only rapid transit system to run on 100% renewable, line-generated energy. 284. In early 2020, City Council approved construction of the Green Line, the third light rail line in the city's rapid transit network. It will be the first rail line in Calgary to operate low-floor trains and is the largest public works project in the history of Calgary, about 3.5 times bigger than the second largest project. Airport's Calgary International Airport is the gateway to Canada's Rocky Mountains. Calgary International Airport YYC, in the city's northeast, is a major transportation and cargo hub for much of central and western Canada. It is Canada's fourth busiest airport, serving 18 million passengers in 2019, 286. The airport serves as the primary gateway into Banff National Park, located 90 minutes west, and the entire Canadian Rocky Mountain Park system. Non-stop destinations include cities throughout Canada, the United States, Europe, Central America, and Asia. Calgary's Springbank Airport, Canada's 11th busiest, serves as a reliever for the Calgary International, taking the general aviation traffic, and is also a base for aerial firefighting aircraft. Pedestrian and Cycling Calgary has the largest paved pathway network in North America, 289, spanning over 1,000 kilometers, 620 miles. Calgary has the most extensive walking and cycling pathway network in North America. There are also 290 kilometers, 180 miles of on-street bikeways, and 96 kilometers, 60 miles of publicly maintained trails. As of 2017, 140,000 Calgarians cycle at least once a week, and about 400,000 cycle occasionally. 291, 40% of cyclists in Calgary ride, no matter how cold it gets, and 96% ride when temperatures are above 0°C. The Peace Bridge provides pedestrians and cyclists access to the downtown core from the north side of the Bow River. The bridge ranked among the top 10 architectural projects in 2012 and among the top 10 public spaces of 2012. Skyway Calgary's +15 Skyway network is the world's most extensive elevated pedestrian skywalk system. In the 1960s, Calgary started to develop a series of pedestrian bridges connecting many downtown buildings. Today, these bridges connect between most of the city's downtown office towers and make up the world's most extensive Skyway network elevated indoor pedestrian bridges, officially called the +15. The system shields pedestrians from the city's extremely cold winter temperatures. The name derives from the fact that the bridges are usually for 0.6 meters, 15 feet above ground. Roads and Highways Calgary lies at the crossroads of Highway 2 and the Trans-Canada Highway, making it an important hub for the transit of goods across Canada and along the Canamex corridor. Stony Trail encircles the city, completing a full ring road. The last segment in West Calgary was completed in December 2023 and is now open to the public. 296 freeways and expressways are mostly called trails. Highway 2, named Deerfoot Trail, is the main north-south route through Calgary and one of the busiest highways in Canada. 297, much of Calgary's street network is on a grid where roads are numbered with avenues running east, west, and streets running north-south. Until 1904, the streets were named. After that date, all streets were given numbers radiating outwards from the city center. 298 roads in predominantly residential areas, as well as freeways and expressways, do not generally conform to the grid and are usually not numbered. However, it is a developer and city convention in Calgary that non-numbered streets within a new community have the same name prefix as the community itself. Rail Calgary's presence along the Canadian Pacific-Kansas City Main Line, which includes the CPKC Alyth Yard, makes the city an important hub of freight rail throughout the province. There is no intercity or regional passenger rail serving the city. In June 2020, the Canada Infrastructure Bank signed a Memorandum of Understanding with the government of Alberta to build a 130-kilometer, 81 miles intercity rail line from downtown Calgary to Banff, and an express line from Calgary International Airport to downtown Calgary. 350 to 400 kilometers per hour, 220 to 250 miles per hour high-speed rail line running from downtown Calgary to downtown Edmonton is planned as well. In July 2021, Elliston signed a memorandum of understanding with the government of Alberta to build the line, and it is expected to open sometime between 2030 and 2032. Between 1955 and 1978, CPR operated a transcontinental passenger rail service called the Canadian, running between Toronto and Vancouver via CPR's right-of-way through Calgary. In 1978, Via Rail assumed responsibility over CPR's Canadian rail service. In the aftermath of another round of deep budget cuts made to Via Rail on January 15, 1990, Via permanently discontinued the Supercontinental and rerouted the Canadian along the Supercontinental CN route, bypassing Regina and Calgary in favor of Saskatoon and Edmonton. Since then, there has been no intercity rail service to or from Calgary, but two new rail tour lines have opened along the CPR right-of-way, Rocky Mountaineer and Royal Canadian Pacific. The latter still operates rail tour services to Calgary, while the former has terminated its westbound services at Banff, 2 hours to the west. Calgary is the largest city in the Canadian province of Alberta. It is the largest metro area within the 3 prairie provinces. As of 2021, the city proper had a population of 1,306,784 and a metropolitan population of 1,680,000, making it the 3rd largest city and 5th largest metropolitan area in Canada. Calgary is at the confluence of the Bow River and the Elbow River in the southwest of the province, in the transitional area between the Rocky Mountain foothills and the Canadian prairies. About 80 kilometers, 50 miles east of the Front Ranges of the Canadian Rockies, roughly 299 kilometers, 186 miles south of the provincial capital of Edmonton, and approximately 240 kilometers, 150 mi, north of the Canada-United States border. The city anchors the south end of the Statistics Canada-defined urban area, the Calgary-Edmonton corridor. Calgary's economy includes activity in many sectors: energy, financial services, film and television, transportation and logistics, technology, manufacturing, aerospace, health and wellness, retail, and tourism. The Calgary metropolitan region is home to Canada's 2nd largest number of corporate head offices among the country's 800 largest corporations, 14. In 2015, Calgary had the largest number of millionaires per capita of any major Canadian city. In 2022, Calgary was ranked alongside Zurich as the 3rd most livable city in the world, ranking 1st in Canada and in North America. In 1988, it became the first Canadian city to host the Olympic Winter Games. Calgary was named after Calgary Castle in Scottish Gaelic, Castile Chalgarret on the Isle of Mull in Scotland. Colonel James MacLeod, the Commissioner of the Northwest Mounted Police, had been a frequent summer guest there. In 1876, shortly after returning to Canada, he suggested its name for what became Fort Calgary. The Indigenous peoples of southern Alberta referred to the Calgary area as Elbow, in reference to the sharp bend made by the Bow River and the Elbow River. In some cases, the area was named after the reeds that grew along the riverbanks, reeds that had been used to fashion bows. In the Blackfoot language, the area is known as Mokinstsis Acapioius, meaning elbow many houses, reflecting its strong settler presence. The shorter form of the Blackfoot name, Mokinstsis, simply meaning elbow, is the popular Indigenous term for the Calgary area. In the Nakota, or Stoney language, the area is known as Uchspawad or Wenchia Space, both meaning elbow. In the Cree language, the area is known as Otskwanik, meaning at the elbow, or Otaskwuni, meaning elbow. In the Tsuut'ina language Sarse, The area is known as Gutsist by older orthography, Kutsisa, meaning elbow. In Kootenai language, the city is referred to as Kaknuktapkik. 28. In the Slavey language, the area is known as Clinchotine Indahe, meaning many horse town, referring to the Calgary Stampede 19 and the city's settler heritage. There have been several attempts to revive the indigenous names of Calgary. In response to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, local post-secondary institutions adopted official acknowledgements of Indigenous territory using the Blackfoot name of the city, Mohkinstsis. In 2017, the Stoney Nakoda sent an application to the government of Alberta to rename Calgary as Wichespo-Odd, meaning Elbow Town. However, this was challenged by the Piakani Blackfoot. Early history. The Calgary area was inhabited by pre-Clovis people whose presence traces back at least 11,000 years. The area has been inhabited by multiple First Nations, the Niitsitapi Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piakani, Nakota, Tsuut'ina Peoples, and Metis Nation, Region 3. In 1787, David Thompson, a 17-year-old cartographer with the Hudson's Bay Company HBC, spent the winter with a band of Piakani Nation encamped along the Bow River. He was also a fur trader and surveyor and the first recorded European to visit the area. John Glenn was the first documented European settler in the Calgary area in 1873. In spring 1875, 3 priests, Lacombe, Remus, and Scollin, built a small log cabin on the banks of the Elbow River. In 1875, the Northwest Mounted Police erected Fort Calgary to police the area. In the fall of 1875, the site became a post of the Northwest Mounted Police and WMP, now the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or RCMP. The NWMP detachment was assigned to protect the Western Plains from U.S. whiskey traders and to protect the fur trade, and Inspector Ephraim Brissabois led 50 Mounties as part of F Troop north from Fort McLeod to establish the site. The I.G. Baker Company of Fort Benton, Montana, was contracted to construct a suitable fort, and after its completion, the Baker Company built a log store next to the fort. The NWMP fort remained officially nameless until construction was complete, although it had been referred to as the Mouth by people at Fort McLeod. 38. At Christmas dinner, NWMP Inspector Ephraim Brissabois christened the unnamed fort Fort Brissabois, a decision which caught the ire of his superiors Colonel James McLeod and Major Atchison Irvine. 38. Major Irvine canceled the order by Brissabois and wrote Hewitt Bernard, the then Deputy Minister of Justice in Ottawa, describing the situation and suggesting the name Calgary put forward by Colonel McLeod. Edward Blake, at the time Minister of Justice, agreed with the name, and in the spring of 1876, Fort Calgary was officially established. In 1877, the First Nations ceded title to the Fort Calgary region through Treaty 7. Citation needed. In 1881, the federal government began to offer leases for cattle ranching in Alberta up to 400 square kilometers, 100,000 acres, for 1 cent per acre per year under the Dominion Lands Act, which became a catalyst for immigration to the settlement. The I.G. Baker Company drove the first herd of cattle to the region in the same year for the Cochrane area by order of Major James Walker. The Canadian Pacific Railway CPR reached the area in August 1883 and constructed a railway station on the CPR-owned Section 15, neighboring the town site across the Elbow River to the east on Section 14. The difficulty in crossing the river and the CPR's efforts to persuade residents resulted in the core of the Calgary town site moving onto Section 15, with the fate of the old town site sealed when the post office was anonymously moved across the icy Elbow River during the night. The CPR subdivided Section 15 and began selling lots surrounding the station for $150 for corner lots and $350 for all others, and pioneer Felix McHugh constructed the first private building on the site. 41 earlier in the decade, it was not expected that the railway would pass near Calgary. Instead, The preferred route put forward by people concerned with the young nation's defense was passing near Edmonton and through the Yellowhead Pass. However, in 1881, CPR changed the plans, preferring the direct route through the prairies by way of Kicking Horse Pass. Along with the CPR, August 1883 brought Calgary the first edition of the Calgary Herald, published on the 31st under the title The Calgary Herald. Mining and ranchy advocate and general advertiser by teacher Andrew M. Armour and printer Thomas B. Braden, a weekly newspaper with a subscription price of $1 per year. Over a century later, the CPR headquarters moved to Calgary from Montreal in 1996. Residents of the now 8-year-old settlement sought to form a local government of their own. In the first weeks of 1884, James Riley, who was building the Royal Hotel east of the Elbow River, circulated 200 handbills announcing a public meeting on January 7, 1884, at the Methodist Church. At the full meeting, Riley advocated for a bridge across the Elbow River and a civic committee to watch over the interests of the public until Calgary could be incorporated. The attendees were enthusiastic about the committee, and on the next evening, a vote was held to elect the 7 members. A total of 24 candidates were nominated, which equaled 10% of Calgary's male population. Major James Walker received 88 votes, the most amongst the candidates. The other 6 members were Dr. Andrew Henderson, George Cliftking, Thomas Swan, George Murdoch, J.D. Moulton, and Captain John Stewart. The Civic Committee met with Edgar Dewdney, Lieutenant Governor of the Northwest Territories, who happened to be in Calgary at the time, to discuss an allowance for a school, an increase from $300 to $1,000 grant for a bridge over the Elbow River, incorporation as a town, and representation for Calgary in the Legislative Council of the Northwest Territories. The committee was successful in getting an additional $200 for the bridge. In May, Major Walker, acting on instructions from the NWT Lieutenant Governor, organized a public meeting in the NWMP barracks room on the issue of getting a representative in the NWT Council. Walker wrote the clerk of the council that he was prepared to produce evidence that Calgary and environs, an area of 1,000 square miles, held 1,000 residents. The requirement for having a council member. 48, a by-election was held on June 28, 1884, where James Davidson Geddes defeated James Kid Oswald to become the Calgary Electoral District representative on the first council of the Northwest Territory. Rise. As for education, Calgary moved quickly. The Citizens Committee raised $125 on February 6, 1884, and the first school opened for 12 children days later on February 18th. Led by teacher John William Costello. The private school was not enough for the needs of the town, and following a petition by James Walker, the Calgary Protestant Public School District No. 19 was formed by the legislature on March 2, 1885.